Let the spirit rise. Well, hello everyone. That was Clock DVA with the song Techno Geist, and if you've never heard of either, go check it out. They're underrated. Way too underrated. Anyway, how are we all doing? I was hoping George would pop up in this cast since he was the one that kind of asked for this, but I'm sure he might catch this later, so what the fucking hell. We got 10 people listening. I might give it a few more minutes for people to show up. I am here in sunny Arizona. It is 105 outside. I don't know what it is in here, but it's not pleasant. And my brain has just had a fuck enough of America Chavez. Seriously. I'm getting some serious burnout. I really hate this character. Um, I don't know. I don't know. You know what? What's that movie, Turning Red? It's like that, but worse. Anyway, well, okay, we got 9 people. I guess somebody left, didn't want to hear me. Um, let's talk about aliens. Why am I J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit? Those in the audience, have you all heard the story? There are 9 of you, so I figure there's enough of you to know, to answer with me and be able to keep track. Pink hand waving. Okay, well, I guess so. So, why am I the alien in a human suit? Why do I make such claims, especially in times like these when everyone's becoming paranoid about UFOs again? Well, I'll give a little comment on that first before we get into my own alien stories. The government's talking so much about how UFO this and UFO that, and let me tell you, when there was the crash at Roswell, and the government scrambled to say there was nothing there and did everything in their power to make that story disappear and call anyone who thought UFOs were real was a kook, they were hiding something. And when the government comes to you and starts saying, no, UFOs are absolutely real, trust us, they're hiding something. That's all I can say, is that don't trust the story. That's always been the case. The old tactic has always been to mislead by first releasing a little bit of truth and then confusing the hell out of it with a lot of false information. That's always how it goes. It's a long, long history of this. You missed it? What did you miss? I just started. I don't know. Anyway, so do I believe in UFOs? Well, yeah, absolutely. I've seen at least one, maybe two. The second one is kind of vague and hard to describe, so I won't even get into it. But the first one I saw, I must have been 13 years old, maybe. I'm not sure. I was coming back from summer camp. I was riding in a bus, and we were coming down a mountain that looked over Paris Lake. Oh, no, it was Lake Elsinore in was it Navarro County or Moreno Valley? So thereabouts in Southern California. And it was looking down over this lake, and shit, there's a silver disc buzzing it, just kind of cruising along. And I think the thing that really blew me away was that, one, it was like my entire world imploded. It was like I was like seeing something that I was assured did not exist and should not be there. And it meant that if I was seeing this, I had to reassess everything about what I thought of the universe, um, which was a bit heavy at age 13. The other one was just how unspectacular it was. It really was just a silver disc, just like a hubcap almost. Um, and it wasn't just me, because other people on the bus saw it too. The kid sitting next to me on the bus saw it. But yeah, that was my main one. And the fact was, it was in broad fucking daylight was the other thing that just blew me away. If only phones could take pictures back then, or that everyone was posting shit on the internet. But we know UFOs exist. I mean, it's undeniable. And our government's gone to great lengths to convince the public that anyone who believed UFOs were real was a kook. In fact, what was it? Was it conspiracy theorist was the one that they came up with? that was specifically to discredit believers of UFOs, and that was after Roswell. Was that term was cooked up? I believe that was the one. But there was a concerted effort by the government, by Air Force intelligence and the CIA, separate programs that didn't talk to each other, by the way, to confuse and discredit and use UFO believers to their advantage. Now, part of that was they knew that the UFO community had been infiltrated by the Soviets, and that the Soviets were using UFO groups as a means of cover so that they could get close to US facilities and observe them. And, if they ever got caught, it was a group of UFO freaks. And so that is known. So that was one of the reasons the Air Force was very hip to confuse the issue and went to great lengths to use true believers and then also planted agents to scare the shit out of the Russians. The second one was that we knew for a fact that one of the earliest and most famous UFO cases was a fraudster and a communist, Adamski, who, it was George Adamski. And let me get the picture of his saucer because you've all seen these pictures. Now, George Adamski was a New Ager and a spiritualist. Can't get that site. Well, fuck you, Google. Okay, let's try DuckDuckGo. Well, it won't seem to let me share the pictures, but this ought to work. George Adamski was a con artist, a spiritualist, and a New Ager who made multiple claims that he had been contacted in the 50s by Space Brothers. And the Space Brothers were, I guess, the original Nordics. They were very Aryan looking and flew around in a ship like this. And he even had photographs. Now, it may have started as a con, maybe not. It's hard to tell. But the fact is, there was enough investigating done that implies he had been duped. That he went out to the desert. I forget why. He saw what appeared to be a landed saucer, went over to it, was welcomed in by these very tall, blonde-haired, Nordic-looking people in these jumpsuits and invited into the craft, where then very svelte, attractive women, Nordic women with big breasts and skimpy outfits, served him space drinks, and then they go into space, and they would tell him messages, and then he'd just wake up back at his home mysteriously, sometimes with photographs or notes or different things. And here's the thing about it was the Alan Dulles, I believe, brother of John Foster Dulles, head of the CIA. Alan Dulles at that point was really into stagecraft and ops that would confuse the shit out of spies. And it is known that Alan Dulles was in contact with Walt Disney and was fully aware and given demonstrations of the ride. Was it Mission to Mars or was it Mission to the Moon? I forget. It was an old Disney ride, and I went on it once before it was dismantled, so I vaguely remember it, okay? And at the time as a kid, it was impressive. Wasn't totally convincing, but I'm sure with hallucinogens, it would have been even more impressive. So I'm pretty certain that Adamski was a dupe, and he was going back to the Russians with all sorts of amazing stories and provided evidence, apparently, that this was a complete CIA operation. The Greys and all the stuff that follows later, that's vastly different, and that makes the government very uncomfortable. Very, very uncomfortable. The interesting thing about the Greys in general is, one, there was something at Roswell. No one goes to that much trouble to hide shit if it's a crashed balloon. And even their cover stories have never really made any sense. But one of the things that was really creepy about it was a nurse who had been in the hospital where they'd supposedly taken the alien bodies had drawn a sketch for a man I guess they were kind of dating. There was the young man who worked for the funeral home in Roswell, and the Air Force had said, we need, was it 4 tiny coffins and a ass load of dry ice, and they were 4 feet tall each. And this young man delivered it. Paperwork's there. We know this happened. And when he was there, he dropped it off at the Army hospital, because it wasn't the Air Force yet. It was still right before they became the Air Force, I believe. It was still the Army Air Corps. They were in transition. And he dropped them off, and he ran into the nurse, and it's like, what the hell's happening? And he got threatened by a couple people in uniforms that were not Army. I think that was his description, and that they actually threatened to really rough him up if he didn't get the hell out of there. Later on, he met up with the nurse again, and she drew him a picture, and the picture looks like the classic gray. Interestingly enough, 6 months after the event, she was transferred to the UK and mysteriously died in a plane crash, as did all the other nurses involved in Roswell. They all mysteriously died in plane crashes or disappeared or had accidents. Now, one would have to think that if you really did encounter something that mysterious, like, say, an alien, they probably wouldn't have actually killed these people. You would want to keep them as an asset, but keep them secret. I mean, if somebody was involved in dissecting an actual alien, you wouldn't want that person loose. Hold on. Then there was the Betty and Barney Hill case in 1962. And despite all the various explanations of why they saw grays, there's no real way to explain why Barney and Betty's aliens, especially Barney, looked like that drawing the nurse did, because nobody knew about that drawing till the 1970s. Because the people of Roswell were generally patriotic, very loyal. The government says don't talk. They didn't talk. And it wasn't until the 70s that people started coming forward. And I'm not talking like, crazy farmers or some person that came out of the woodwork. We're talking officers here. And the whole thing about Jesse Marcel, let me get his rank. They kept saying, oh, he mistook it. It was a weather balloon. He made a mistake. Here's the thing about Jesse Marcel, the man who called in, hey, we got a flying saucer, and it made the news, who was then defamed and took all the blame for it. It was just a balloon. He didn't know. Jesse Marcel was a lieutenant colonel who was in the Army Air Corps and then later the Air Force. And he administered cross operations without atomic bomb tests at Bikini Atoll. This dude would know a fucking weather balloon if he saw one. Not only that, if there was some sort of top secret experiment going on base by, like, say, some claims that had been, they were testing high altitude halo drops with dummies. Another one was talking about radar decoys. There was a number of explanations of what they were testing. Regardless, this man, a lieutenant colonel at Roswell, would have been told it was going on. Keep in mind, in 1946, the A-bomb, you had to have really good clearance and to be trusted and extremely competent to be in on that. So, okay, the idea that he would mistake a weather balloon or a radar decoy for a flying saucer is utterly ridiculous. And I also really don't know why you would need 4 coffins, dry ice, and 2 trucks to cart everything out of the field at the ranch where the disc supposedly crashed. What really happened? We don't know, but nothing lines up with what we've been told. And to this day, the government's been very, very sketchy. The one that really got me was when Trump demanded seeing the Roswell files and the evidence, saying he wanted to release it. He went, and then later he came back, and you can find this on the internet. The interview was televised, and he flat out said something to the effect of, "I'm going to really have to think about it. They showed me some really impressive stuff with long-range implications. I'll have to think long and hard if I'm going to release this." That was his answer. And we know Trump, he can't keep his mouth shut for anything, especially if he thinks people should know it. He's going to say it. So clearly he saw something. There's also the story with Jackie Gleason, but I'll save that for later. I don't know if that's really important. Needless to say, Jackie Gleason was a very good friend of President Nixon. What few people know is that I'll tell it. Fuck it, I'll tell it. Jackie Gleason, to the moon, Alice, the honeymooners, was an incredibly patriotic man. He was a Republican. He was very much pro-army, pro-military, and was extremely good friends with Nixon. But he was also obsessed with UFOs. So much so that he had even built a house in the shape of a flying saucer, and he had all these books and paraphernalia, and he did his own amateur research, and he asked Nixon about Roswell. And there's conflicting stories, but the one his wife told, and this is recorded, you can find it, is that Gleason went out to meet with Nixon. They were golfing, and he said, "Okay, well, if you want to see something, I'll fly you out to Texas tomorrow, and I'll show you what we got, but you can't talk about it." And apparently Gleason never told anyone but his wife, and his wife talked. And we do know that Gleason had hung out with Nixon on that day. That is confirmed. According to Gleason's wife, Nixon showed him an alien body that was dead in some sort of container, and a craft that seemed to kind of hover on its own without any power. And it was wreckage, but it still hovered. That was the claim. True? I don't know. But it's an interesting story, and there are elements to it. The Hill case, 1962, the first known popularized abduction story. Again, there was something to it, and the government's very touchy about talking about it. You can find the transcripts or the recordings of their hypnotic regression. They're fascinating to listen to. And again, the guy who did the hypnotic regression was no amateur. He's still operating today in the medical field. He's incredibly respected. He doesn't like to address it because there's the stigma attached to it. But the Hills were recommended to this guy because he was using post-hypnotic regression as a method to treat post-traumatic stress in soldiers. And the Hills were showing signs of post-traumatic stress. And in a roundabout way, they ended up becoming subject. They said, "Okay, well, we'll help you out because, here's a civilian case, and we don't know what's wrong. We don't know why you have these symptoms. And we'll see if we can't help you out, reconcile this." To this day, this guy's work is legit. He was in a documentary about these breakthroughs that were made in aiding and helping Vietnam War vets deal with post-traumatic stress. To this day, a lot of his methods are used because they're effective in treating post-traumatic stress. So, yeah, this wasn't just some kook like, oh fuck, I forget his name. He was the guy that screwed up the Strieber case. What was the film called? I'll remember it later. The book's on the shelf. But yeah, there were a lot of kooks who started using hypnotic regression to plant memories and really just screwed the whole thing up. But the third case was the Andreessen case, and that one's kind of difficult to explain, but it was a woman who lived out on a farm. It's not well known. but she was a Christian. It was Betty Andreessen. Yeah, Betty again, right? And she claims that in 1967, she had had a number of encounters with what she thought were angels, she had said. And her drawings were grays. Now, the interesting thing is these grays wore uniforms, but then again, so did the Hills. So they saw their grays, the grays they saw wearing uniforms, which was kind of interesting. But in each case, they all drew the same thing, and there was no knowledge of any of this. None of these people knew anything about each other or the cases. This was before the internet. It was before, we were doing all this investigative reporting. And whether or not the Andreessen affair was a case of hypnagogic visions or what, the most interesting thing about her case is that she'd had long discussions with the aliens she encountered, and the stuff they told her were really far out interesting concepts that you wouldn't expect from an uneducated woman who had a high school diploma and nothing else, who spent her life on a farm and led a very sheltered life. One of the interesting things is she had asked them, what was it? How far away did you come to get here? And the answer they gave her was something to the effect of, well, when your sun goes nova, it'll be this bright and it will be visible at a maximum distance of this. This is how we measure distance in space. Like, that's an interesting answer. I wouldn't really expect it from someone who's not familiar with sci-fi, but okay. But it was a lot of stuff like that. And another interesting was with her discussions, there seemed to be a lot of misunderstanding of colloquialisms. And both cases, in the Andreessen case and the Hill case, was that when they talked to the aliens had a very hard time talking to them about time. Because in both cases, they'd say the aliens had concepts of like pretty soon or later, before, after, long time, short time. But when trying to speak to them about days, weeks, months, and years, problems arose. They had a very hard time discussing it. Well, if you're from another star, your day and your time measurements would be completely different. Or if you're a star-faring civilization on multiple worlds, you would need to have a different type of way to tell time rather than the rotation of a planet. Just saying, it's interesting. So that's just a little back knowledge on the whole UFO stuff. After that, soon as Close Encounters came out, and also the TV movie about the Hills came out in 1975, after that, you could not trust any story because the public's minds have been contaminated with that image and that narrative of how an abduction goes. And after that, more and more claims of abductions all started representing that pattern that the Hills described. Prior to the Hill case becoming famous, UFO encounters or abductions, the aliens rarely looked alike. They rarely looked human, for that matter, or they looked like super Aryans. Yeah, it's weird. Either they were blue-eyed blonde, they look like Klaatu from The Day the Earth Stood Still, essentially, or they were like, one was like kind of a mound of goo with a box for a head. There were claims of weird-looking geometric robots. It was, go down the list. Strangely enough, in Europe, most of the aliens that were reported looked like elves and mimes and clowns. Don't ask why. Or weird fairy tale nightmare creatures. So going back to basics, UFOs are real. The phenomena is undeniable. The Phoenix Lights should have put that to rest, if not all the other cases that have been verified, like the Rendlesham Forest incident. Was it there was a case in, I think, 68 in Australia, which literally had a landing at a school, and then the thing flew off, and a lot of the teachers were all basically scared into shut the fuck up. And there was one kid who apparently approached it, and it was very interesting. Her and her family just moved away. A week later, they were gone. And journalists tracked her down, and she was living in Sydney after that, far, far away from where she had been living. And she didn't want to talk about it, said that she talked to the government a lot and has very vague memories, doesn't really remember anything of that time. But there are a lot of these cases where, look, something was there. I mean, you have far too many people. The incident at the Chicago airport, again, too many people saw it. So clearly, this is a phenomena that happens. What it is, we don't know. Us attaching aliens to it is how we've put it into context. That is the context we have given it. Whether there are aliens inside or if it's a completely different phenomena, it doesn't really matter. The context we've chosen to interact with it is as if it's aliens from another world. Carl Jung, his very last book was on UFOs, and I think he wrote that in 68, 69, thereabouts. And I had read it, and he had stressed he was a flat-out believer in the phenomena. He was certain, and keep in mind, Carl Jung was a friend of Alan Dulles of the CIA. They knew each other. And again, Carl Jung was a believer that the phenomena was real. Whether it was aliens or not, he couldn't say. He said that the human mind was perceiving them as technology angels, angels of the modern era, which I find very fascinating. Now, the other thing is the image of the gray has become so universal in our culture that the gray started replacing certain images in hypnagogic visions, aka night terrors. And you can graph that after the atomic bomb and after World War II, as we got this leap forward in technology, people stopped seeing witches and devils and what was it, incubi sitting on their chests, usually when they had night terrors. More and more, they were seeing ghosts and aliens, really. That was the most common one. The only time we had an uptick of the devil again was in the 70s when all those Satanist movies were coming out. But less and less were people seeing the old hag witch staring at them. More often, they were seeing grays standing beside their bed. And we know for a fact that now it's a diagnosable, measurable phenomena, that this is something in our culture's subconscious, that it's an idea we all share, and therefore it's a reference point we all touch upon. Other cultures will see other things in their night terrors. It's cultural specific. And grays are typically only seen by the American West, or the West in the United States, Canada, and Japan, and England. You get into Europe and the rest of the world, they don't really see grays so much. They see other things. I think Southeast Asia, it's still mostly demons. And then there's the phenomena of the shadow man, which everyone sees. All cultures see that, but I don't want to get into that. So that complicates matters more. That makes it even more complicated, because now this is an image that has replaced an older image in our mind. It's become a part of our collective reference points that we all have. Oh, shit. You saw the Shadow Man? Those aren't pleasant. So, okay. With that laid down, I will preface this with, I still think what I experienced were probably hypnagogic visions. But from a writer perspective, it really doesn't matter. So when are the cool ones, grays, going to reveal themselves to So we're the cool ones Greys reveal themselves to. Exactly. But it is interesting that when you look at the mythos or mythology that's cropped up behind the Greys, they're cerebral. They're the superego. They're almost genderless in appearance. They're unemotional. They're pure logic and thought. Whereas the reptoids or reptilians, they're devil worshippers. They're rapists. They eat children. They suck blood. They want to, they're just debaucherous, manipulative, evil assholes who just want to manipulate, use, and apparently use us for food and sacrifice us to their god. Whereas the Greys, it's usually either they want to tell us stuff about how we need to do this, that, or the other thing to further our evolution or development as a species, or they're coming to us because they don't remember things like how to nurture their children, or that certain emotions no longer make sense to them, and that they themselves are weakened as a species because of it. That's usually the mythology. Reptoids ran Epstein Island. I would think so. And you can take reptoids as a metaphor for the reptilian mind and, people in Hollywood, put simply. Or you could take it literal. It's up to you. I thought it was interesting that Hunter S. Thompson kept referring to debaucherous rich people as reptiles in his stories. Just saying. So again, I think what I experienced was a series of hypnagogic visions. But I thought I'd give you a little history lesson before I dive into it. Give me a second. I'll be right back. All right. So when I was in college, I spent 2 years in San Francisco, and then the next year after that, I lived in Berkeley for 2 years. While I was in Berkeley, I was descending deeper and deeper into horrible, and I do mean horrible, post-traumatic stress. A week after I graduated high school, I was caught in a shooting. It was basically somebody had a gun. He was a deputy for the San Bernardino Police Department or Sheriff's Department, and he had been having a real bad week and snapped and picked this car of random teenagers hanging out, enjoying their summer, chased us down, ran us off the road, and started shooting. And the first shot as we fled away in our vehicle was the driver's side mirror. The second shot hit the back rear tire, right side. Third shot hit the trunk, and fourth shot missed. And that third shot that hit the trunk, well, we got away, and we thought, oh my God, can you believe that really happened? Holy shit. And we thought we had gotten away scot-free, and they're like, shit, we're going to have one hell of a story to tell everyone. Until I felt that wet spot on my back. And I reached back and I touched it, and I came back with lots and lots of blood. And I could get into that, but I don't really feel like it. I ended up on the operating table within 3 hours, and I've got a nice big scar across my stomach. The corrupt San Bernardino Sheriff's Department stood up for the guy. Even though they gave him the gun, the Riverside Police Department and courts did not want to press too hard because they wanted to remain on good terms with the sheriffs. So the guy got a 2-year sentence in prison for trying to kill 3 teenagers and firing a gun at random in a neighborhood. And he served 1.5 years. Yeah, fuck California. And you know what? For all their bullshit about gun laws, nothing would have changed. Their gun laws wouldn't have done fuck all because his gun had been issued to him by the police or by the sheriff's department. So there you go. Fuck California. I was, right after it happened, for a long time, I didn't really feel anything. I felt fine. It's like, shit, I survived death. I'm awesome. But as time went on, I started to kind of lose my mind and get more and more paranoid, delusional. I've gotten into it in the past, but let's just say I was in a terrible state of mind. And while I was in college, I was spiraling into that. And I was in San Francisco, which is like the worst place to be mentally ill in. San Francisco is full of narcissistic, mean scumbags who all think you're a bit player in their own personal movie. And if you're mentally ill, they'll encourage it. They don't tell you to seek help. They don't say, hey, well, maybe that's kind of a crazy idea. Or, maybe you should kind of rethink your logic that, no, oh, that's true. Yeah, you should explore that about yourself. It's like, fuck yourself. And you spend 4 years in an environment where everyone's self-centered, everyone wants to use you, everyone's mean, but pretending to be the nicest person in the world. Oh, you've all met woke people. It was an entire city of that before woke was a thing. And they all had no sense of humor. So while I was in Berkeley, living there, I was spiraling down. I lived alone in a studio apartment. And I was getting crazier and crazier, having more and more sleep trouble. And I started having these series of like insanely lucid dreams. And I was also having night paralysis, where, I would come to in the night paralysis, or I'd have sleep paralysis, and I'd look up. And, you 6 grays would phase in out of nothingness and appear next to, lining up 3 on each side of the bed. Sometimes they just stand there and stare at me, or just fade back out. I'd go back to sleep, but also, and I occasionally still get that. Pretty rare nowadays. But yeah, none of this coming through doors or what. No, just phase into existence. But I started having these series of incredibly lucid, real dreams, where every dream had kind of the same similar pattern, where I would be going about my life and something would happen that was life-changing. It would have to be one of those things that there's no going back from, like accidentally running over a kid in the street. What do you do, right? Or, you come across someone who's dying, or someone who's terminally ill, or I don't know, I can't remember all of them, but it was always a very one was another one where suddenly everyone was convinced I was a criminal, was another one, and I wasn't, and everyone was like, ready to turn me into the police. But it was always something happened, and I'd have to piece it back together, or I would have to deal with it, knowing that life would never be the same after that point. And in every single one of the dreams, they were always intense. They were incredibly stressful, but always when I got to the point where a decisive thing would happen and I'd make that choice and move forward, everything would freeze, the reality would stop, and then kind of just flicker out of existence. And I'd look up and there'd be this window floating in space, as if it's just hanging there, and behind it is just black nothingness that you could reach your arm into. And that window there, this bright light shooting out of it, and there was always 2 grays standing in the window at controls, and I'd realize it was a simulation. And then I would wake up. And I remember one where it was more symbolic, where there was this girl who was dying, and that she had a limited amount of time, and it was somehow it was up to me to kind of stage this series of events, don't ask how, that would allow this person to get the most out of their last days on Earth before they passed away. And as I'm organizing it and putting it all together and making all these events happen and getting people together with her and helping her out, and it's all going to plan and everything's right, it all flickers away and it was just another simulation. And I think that was the last one I ever had, where it was like that intense. But then after that, it was just occasionally I'd get the night terrors, and there they are standing next to the bed. Nothing, did nothing, just standing there by the bed. Nothing special. And then in time, it was probably about a year later, I had another really super realistic dream. And I was riding in a van, and we're in the woods, and I'm in the back seat of the van with two other young men and a young woman. Very average looking, very plain, nothing remarkable. Brown hair, brown eyes, white t-shirt, jeans. And at some point, it comes out, she says she's an alien in a bioengineered body, basically piloting a body. And the two young men in the vehicle are making fun of her and laughing at her, and oh yeah, right. And I'm not sure why, but I stop them and I say, no, you don't get it. The reason you have to laugh and act like that is that you don't understand, and that the things she's saying and the things she's trying to explain are so beyond human concepts that we're not capable of understanding them, and that we just have to accept them as they are, and respect them, but realize we're not developed enough to quite conceive and understand what they are. And then the whole tone of the dream changed, and she's talking to me. And it was like I had suddenly made peace with the night terrors or the dreams. And I had made peace with the fact that I was repeatedly having these grays intervene in my life. And we had a long conversation. I don't really remember what much of it was about, other than that I would get my shit together and that I would come through the period in life that I was in, and that it would be okay. And there were some other questions, but I remember the one other thing I distinctly remember was her saying something to the effect of, "Oh, I'm related to you." What that meant, who the fuck knows? Just, oh yeah, I'm your cousin. We're distant cousins. And I woke up. But clearly, the dreams, the night terrors, the conversation, it all had the same emotions, fear and awe, and all. I learned this later, that it had all the telltale signs of a religious experience. And I really hadn't thought about that, but alien abductions in general, the beats of the sequence all have the same, I guess, what thematic narrative of a religious experience, where it begins in terror and awe, confusion and misunderstanding, coming to terms with it, respecting it, and then there's kind of this process of rebirth or moving past, and or gaining new awareness, and that's the last phase, and then finding new direction. And this is when I started researching the subject, because I hadn't at the time, and realizing, no, this actually is a known phenomena. And I've done more and more research finding that some of the stories about Greys really match up with the Fae. Some of them match up with angels. But I think the one that really got me thinking was that, again, I'm an atheist. I mean, I could get into why. Fuck it. I guess this is the show for it. I'll get into why. Mainly because I've done a lot of research through history, and I've seen the stories that have become modern Christianity, and also Islam and Judaism, but modern Christianity specifically. I've seen and read the iterations where the story would begin one way in Sumeria, and then Babylonia, the story gains a new element and is told again, and then Egypt, it gains more elements and is told again. And over time, this story became the Christ story. And my opinion personally is we evolved it. It was social evolution, and that just like my little rats show signs of altruism and selflessness, conscious, not instinctual, and can actually show altruism and compassion to a rat that's not of their pack, not of their fur color, simply because the animal's in need, makes me come to believe that this is a social evolution that we went through, that just as we evolved physically, we socially evolved. This narrative that's I guess in a way more real than reality if it lives in our minds and lives as something that transcends space and time. It can't die, and in a way is more real than any one human because it exists in so many others. But I come at it from the perspective we evolved this. Now, if you want to say God made us evolve it so that we'd acknowledge him, or this was just the best winning strategy for survival, was, hey, maybe life is important, and maybe redemption's important, and maybe we should be nicer to each other, and there be a certain level of respect, and that the idea is that no one is above judgment. Either way, it works for me, in my opinion. I know that for some of you out there, the miracle aspect has to be there or it doesn't work. I can't say I understand why, but I don't care. I mean, it's your faith, not mine. And if it works for you, and it obviously has for a lot of people, good, absolutely. And for that matter, I'll say I'm even somewhat envious of the faithful. I mean, I would really like to think death wasn't the end. And keep in mind, I've experienced death. I looked down the barrel of a gun. I nearly bled out and died. I was at the edge there. So in that regard, I would really like to think, I'd get to see my friends and the people I cared about after I passed. Or for others, I guess, come back for another try. I don't know. I would like to think that. I would really like to think that there is a cosmic intelligence that exists outside of space and time that is pushing toward an ordered direction and wants the best for us. And that would be nice. But I just don't have that faith. But what really got me thinking about the alien stuff was the fact that once I was commenting, I don't know why it is so few atheists understand faith and why faith is important, and don't understand why we need things like Christianity and why Christianity is different than other religions. And Cheweldy, of all people, said that's because you have your grays. And I thought about it and was like, shit, you're right. I said the atheist had a religious experience. And ever since then, the little gray dude, for me at least, and by the way, the grays I saw weren't the dark, spooky looking ones. The grays I always saw were like this ash white color. They were almost white. So and they weren't scary looking at all. But I mean, they had the big eyes and the bulbous head and all that, but they were almost white in appearance. And I never got any sense of the fear was not being able to understand. It wasn't like I felt threatened or I would be harmed. It was that this was something beyond me that I couldn't understand. And that's kind of a religious experience, right? And so in a sense, yeah, that the little gray guys come to kind of symbolize in me those higher concepts. It's that symbol I turn to as, okay, this means these things, and it works. And that is why also I say I'm a human. I'm an alien. I'm a gray alien in a human suit, because I had a dream where a gray visits me in a human suit and says, "Oh, I'm related to you," and it's always been a joke. It was something I've said jokingly for a very long time. Okay, so I have not looked at any of your comments, so this will be very interesting to see. If you have any questions about these, go right ahead. I mean, the interesting thing is, for the very longest time, I was not a believer at all in any of this UFO stuff. And my interest in researching the phenomena was because of my own experiences and knowing about the hypnagogic visions and the fact that there are archetypes in our mind that we all share. And knowing that the gray has become an archetype in our mind, as the reptoid appears to have started to become as well. But as I started researching the phenomena, there does also the government doesn't want us to know about something. You don't work that hard to cover something up, and people have seen people have seen similar things without knowledge of each other or even the phenomena back in the 50s and 60s. And the faked abductions that I know about have a very different tenor. There was another abduction, the very famous one, the first one that was ever reported was the Villa-Lobos case in Brazil. But we're pretty certain that was a CIA op with a helicopter. And there's even paperwork that kind of shows that. Let's see. So I'm going to go through your comments. I'm going to say again, there are angels in the way God could try to contact you and save you. Well, I hope you're right. I mean, you have no idea how much it would be a relief to know I'm wrong. Seriously. One of the hardest things was watching my grandfather die and seeing the Catholics of the family all gather around him. And I couldn't share the experience of I'll see him again, where they all were convinced they would. So I hope you're right and I'm wrong. Okay. Did you ever try to talk to them when they stood by the bed? The thing with the night terrors or the sleep paralysis, it's one of the most painful parts of sleep paralysis. Often when you try to talk, you can't. Now, when I see the grays, it doesn't really scare me anymore. I just like, oh, okay, they're there. Hey, and just wait for it to end or fall back asleep. Like I said, it's not scary anymore. But when I have other night terrors where it's just stark terror, and I'm in bed and I'm in the room and I'm looking around, there's nothing there, but yet I feel this unquenchable, just vile dread and horror going through me, and there's nothing there. One of the things that people often do is try to shout to get their partner to wake them up, and you never can. You might make some like, that's the best you can do. And when it's the shadow man, that's the worst. But yeah, you'll often try and shout to try and either wake yourself up or to get the person next to you to wake you up, and you can't. Okay, Tweldy said I knew it. I don't know what he's responding to there. Well, they're called spiritual guild or guardian angels. They walk with men and women since the beginning of time. Sounds like Jordan Peterson stuff. Well, Jordan Peterson helped put it into context for me. I know a lot of people make fun of him, say he's just telling people the obvious, but it's not obvious to everyone. I mean, not everyone thinks in the same way. And people of faith think about things. Some concepts are easier for you, and others aren't, and vice versa. So, no, I think one of the best things Peterson ever did was wake the atheist community up to the fact that no, it doesn't matter whether the story of Christ is 100% literal or bits of history pieced together or completely false. It doesn't matter. What matters is we have it, we developed it, and it has basically led to the best civilization in history, and that we damn well should hold on to it. Many things in the Christian Bible are added in its legitimacy, just like demons and gods were added into Buddha's story, and there's certainly a core that's original. Yeah, those ideas seem to go way back in time, way back, before we were writing stuff down. You're the most Christian atheist I've ever met. There is. I call him God. Ego and pride keeps the smart blind. That's not ego, man. Not with me. I'm pretty lax when it comes to religion, but I ultimately do believe it. Themes like the theme song in that Star Trek with Scott Bakula. I'll tell you a story about that sometime. Okay, I'll tell you now. Why not? Kat and I got married, had two wedding ceremonies. We had one with the family, and then we had a legal one in Vegas on the bridge of the Enterprise when it was at the Star Trek Experience. And it was the actual bridge for the first season of Next Generation. And while you're in there, they play all these different songs, the various themes from Star Trek. And whenever that song, from Enterprise would come on, we were there. The song from Enterprise comes on, and Kat and I are like, "Oh, okay, I think we're ready to go now," because we got to hang out there and just tour the bridge for as long as we wanted. And the Ferengi, because they had people dressed up, says, "Yeah, we play this song to make people leave. We don't want you hanging out here too long. So this is why we play that one." Okay. Comments on the church. A logic named Joe, and I'm starting to feel. You got done reading a logic named Joe, and you're creeped out. Yeah, it is kind of creepy, isn't it? When I saw the Shadow Man, tried to yell till I woke up to the sound of my own voice, sounding like a moo. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to do a show on the Shadow Man. That's a whole different show. I've done one already, but the problem with doing shows on the Shadow Man is it scares the fuck out of people. And that's fair. You have nightmares about giant spiders, more tall, shadowy figures. Yeah. Oh, you meant the Reddit atheists. Yeah, God. Talk about, you know what? I think a lot of those people are believers and they're just pissed off. They're angry. I think a lot of those Reddit atheists just don't like the idea that there are rules that they should adhere to. That they just kind of want a free pass to feel and do whatever the fuck they want. Well, that's good you're not scared. That's usually the best way to go. Okay, going through your comments. Oh, I've been on for an hour. Most are Pedro, too. So, yeah, there's my story of why I'm a alien in a human suit, or something to that effect. Any other questions before I call it an evening? I've been on for an hour. It's finally cooling down outside. And I still got to finish writing up about America Chavez. And it was too miserable today to work. So I'll give it a few seconds or a few more, about a minute before I take off. If you have any questions, if you want to toss any UFO questions at me. They think they're bold while breaking their fingernails on keys. Yeah. I don't know. The ones that really get me are the ones like PZ Myers. What the fuck was that guy's problem? I mean, that it struck me as that was a fat, impotent beta male with a lot of anger and daddy issues. The image is burned into your brain. You never forget. All right. Well, I guess you guys don't have any more questions for me. How do I feel about affirmative action being repealed? I think it's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. It's outlived its purpose, and it may not have done a very good job to begin with, ever. I mean, clearly it wasn't working for the last 20 years, at least, maybe last 30 years it hasn't worked. I don't know if it ever worked, but it's racist, and I'm glad it's gone. And I think worse than that, it really did send the message to certain groups of people: you couldn't do it without the government. You're not smart enough. You're not good enough. You're not human enough to go to college without, daddy government's help holding your hand and making it easy for you. So yeah, I'm glad affirmative action is gone. Now, if only we could get rid of quota hiring. Okay. It's amazing Mary Chavez was still an asshole even when her creators recreated it. Yeah. Okay. In Twitter, they're saying black people couldn't make it, and it's against them. Really, I think the worst thing our culture has done to Black America is have low expectations for it. Seriously. You look at the two groups of people in this country who have had the most government help: Native Americans and Black Americans, and they're the worst off. And they're the ones stuck where they are. Have you noticed that? The groups that decide, no, I don't want to be on welfare, I don't want the government to eat, I don't want help, or the government won't help, are far much better off. So yeah, I think really affirmative action was just another, liberals feeling good about themselves while basically treating people of other skin colors as primitives who couldn't really do it on their own. It's the same thing with crime stats. I think part of it is, they don't talk about crime stats because it makes people uncomfortable, but also you get a liberal by themselves. They'll say, oh, well, the black crime stats, that's cultural. What do you mean by that? How am I supposed to take that? Uh, 21st century tinfoil hat. Yeah. I don't know. I think Twitter's actually gotten much better now with the Elon Musk at the wheel. I mean, a lot of news is getting out that would have otherwise vanished, and it's making life very difficult for the rich and the powerful. Okay, well, I've been on for an hour, and we can definitely bring up other weird subjects if you'd like. And I will talk to you another day. Take care. Oh, and order Boobs of Steel, link in the description. It will be available very soon.